Well, hello and welcome to my channel, Louise Savage Muses, where I muse about books and more books. Today I thought I'd muse about books that have sort of real kind of thrills and spills and twists in them. I don't know about you, but this time of year it's really foggy today. Maybe that's inspired me. I've been out walking in the mists and murks of Shropshire. And I just sort of thought, there's nothing better, is there, than snuggling up with a book that sort of has you on the edge of your seat at this time of year particularly. So I've chosen 4 to talk about today. The first one is Magpie by the wonderful Elizabeth Day. And this book has a really sort of strong place in my heart because I was fortunate enough to interview Elizabeth up in the lovely Wirral earlier on, not this month, last month, about this very book. So I've had a chance to sort of quiz her about it. And she just is a fantastic human being. You know, her podcast, How to Fail, I'm sure some of you will have come across. So I hadn't read any of her novels before at this point. This was my first. I have read one since and really enjoyed it. But this is Magpie. And what an amazing cover. I mean, it's just beautiful, isn't it? That feather and the female sort of silhouette here really sort of grabs your attention. And I was fascinated as to why she'd named this book Magpie. Because the book starts with this fantastic scene where a magpie flies into this house and causes some havoc, as you can imagine, and sort of appears at relevant points during the narrative. And she said it was because she was very frightened of magpies when she was younger and wanted to kind of excise that fear. And this was the result. So thank goodness for that. It just shows how fear can be a really positive thing. Anyway, the novel faces all sorts of fantastic issues in that it really addresses the issue of infertility, of IVF, and yet it's, well, I would describe it as a thriller. She wasn't so comfortable with that as a description, but it did have me on the edge of my seat all the way through. And there's one breathtaking twist in it and several other sort of other twists and turns as well. I absolutely loved it. The story revolves around a man called Jake and 2 women, Marissa and Kate, who both are entangled in his life. They, in many ways, are much more the focus of the novel than he is. And Marissa is somebody who is thoroughly explored in the novel. She's a really interesting woman. At times we see things from her childhood perspective, which I found very interesting. And there's also a superb sort of portrait of motherhood in many ways in this novel, because Jake's mother is a force to be reckoned with. And I really enjoyed reading the portrayal of her and her husband. And Marissa's mother is largely absent, but we find out things about her. So she's sort of taken different angles on motherhood, if you like. There's also the character of the consultant who they visit to sort of treat them for IVF. And I don't think I've read a novel that features IVF before. I could be wrong. And I think this may be one of the reasons that, well, I know this is one of the reasons that drove Elizabeth to write this book. But the consultant in it is, well, I was incandescent with rage, basically, when I read the way that he treated the couple, particularly the female who was seeking IVF, some of the language that he used and the ways that he sort of, the things he felt he could say and get away with saying were deeply, deeply shocking. So it was a fascinating insight into that whole process and how that works. And I realised that I'd never really been exposed to that before. You know, didn't really understand the ins and outs of it. and I feel really well informed now as a result of reading the novel. So it's really gripping, but it also has some very important messages about infertility and how women cope and deal with it. Well, not just women, but men too, and the implications it has for the wider family as well. It's a very claustrophobic read. The vast majority of the novel takes place within one house, and I really liked that. And I know Elizabeth was describing how that may well be something to do with the fact that she wrote it during lockdown. So you've got this kind of insular world that's being described to you. The characters don't venture out of that very often, and I found that interesting too. And it's not for the faint-hearted. There's some quite disturbing scenes in this, but they're treated, I think, with sort of dignity. Anyway, first recommendation for today. Really enjoyed this book, Magpie, and hopefully you will too, should you wish to pick it up. Now, the next book on my list, as you can probably see, is really, really battered and worn. And I just opened it up before I started recording. And inside it says, very, very proudly, I don't know if you can read that, Louise E. Savage. Is it August? I obviously wasn't reading that over the winter. 1979, look at that. And I was 14 at the time. And if you'd asked me, I'd have said that wrong way around. If you'd asked me, I'd have said that I'd read this when I was a bit younger than that. But it made a huge impression on me. So Wilkie Collins was writing in the Victorian era. He was an acquaintance / friend of Charles Dickens. And this novel is sometimes described, I think, as the first sort of detective novel. And it has stayed with me all those years. It was one of the novels, I think, that really switched me on to reading. And I remember being completely unable to put it down, even though at the time, I found the language quite challenging. It's a bit of a slow burn to start with, from what I remember. But once you get swept into it, it's impossible to put down, or at least I found it that way. And I can still, there are some scenes which involve a beach and quicksand and a little hut in this novel. And I can still really, really clearly visualise those scenes. You know, they've stayed with me all these years in my head because it made such an impression. It revolves around the story of the Moonstone, which is a huge diamond, I suppose a bit like the Koh-i-Noor or something like that. I think it's fictional. And there's a young woman called Rachel who is given the diamond on her birthday by her uncle, who's a bit of a character. He has just returned from India and it's an ill-gotten gain. He doesn't come across this diamond in a very, what's the word? Well, it's just very shady, to say the least. And she's given this diamond and she wears it to her birthday party and it vanishes. And there are all sorts of suspects. There's a maid, there's 3 Indian jugglers, various other characters. Rachel herself is one of the suspects. And gradually, we get to the bottom of where this diamond has gone. It's really gripping, as I've already said. And you really can't, you're given just enough clues to sort of stay trying to work it out for yourself where the story is going to end. I'm not going to spoil it, obviously. So again, a fantastic read. Absolutely love this. And maybe it's time I read it again. I'm not sure. Maybe, I don't know. Is it good to go back to these books that you read when you were so much younger and had such a big impression? Maybe I'll listen to it. Maybe I'll listen to it on Audible. Anyway, there we go. The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. Next up, Sarah Waters' novel Fingersmith. Now, I think I read this in about 2004. And again, it's a novel that really, really stayed with me. I hadn't read anything by Sarah Waters before. I didn't really know much about her. I was just browsing in a bookshop, thought, I fancy a historical romp. And that's exactly what this novel is. But there is a twist in it, which at the time I found, I was absolutely like, I did not see it coming at all. That'll probably ruin it now, because if you decide you're going to go away and read it, you might be disappointed by that twist. It's a bit like when people rave about films, isn't it? And, you know, and then it doesn't quite live up to expectation. Anyway, I thought this novel was fabulous. And again, just the sort of thing that I like to curl up with on cold winter nights. It set in Victorian London, as I think I've already said, so there's kind of connection, I suppose, with the Moonstone. And it features around this character called Sue. I think she's Sue Trinder. I can't quite remember. And anyway, she is an orphan. She's growing up in the slums in London, and the descriptions of those slums are superb. It's all very gawblimey misses and all that kind of thing. And she's growing up under the care of a woman who is a baby farmer. So she looks after all these babies and gives them gin to keep them content and quiet. And anyway, Sue is a fingersmith. She's a petty thief. And, you know, she's living with a whole household full of them. That's the way that they earn their living, apart from the baby farming. And she's really good at it. And they have a visitor called Gentleman, and he's the most fantastic thief, con artist of them all, and everybody sort of really looks up to him, as his name would suggest. And he manages to acquire Sue to help him to in a plot to seduce this young lady who has a lot of money, called Maud Lily. And the whole plot revolves around Sue becoming a maid, which of course is really interesting because Sue has not been trained in that direction, has had nothing to do with the gentry or anything like that. But she is kind of the linchpin for this plot that he's formed to try and get hold of all of Maud's money. And I just absolutely loved this. It's just sheer entertainment, really. There's also, I think it was probably the first novel that I read that included any sort of characters that were lesbians either, and I found that, you know, for me at the time, that was really, in my naivety, that was really quite groundbreaking. So there we go, Fingersmith, Sarah Waters, loved it. And finally, Yinkin Braithwaite's My Sister the Serial Killer. Now, what's not to like about that cover? It's the reflection in the glasses. I don't know if you can see that. This is a fabulous read. I've recommended this to an awful lot of people, and I haven't yet had anyone come back to me and say it's not, you know, it didn't do it for me. It is exactly what it says. It features a young woman called Corede, whose sister Ayula is a serial killer, and it's the perfect pairing in a way because Corede is a nurse. And the novel opens, this is not a spoiler, it opens with Ayula phoning her sister and saying, "You need to come and help me, I've done it again." And I'm paraphrasing, obviously. And she's committed her third murder, and each case is one of her boyfriends. So she gets a boyfriend and then she ends up murdering them, which is all very distressing. And it's a really interesting sort of take on sisters and sisterhood, and how far would you go to help your sister. Having sisters myself, I know that I'd probably go to the ends of the earth. I don't know whether I'd do this though. And the plot becomes really complicated because Ayula is one of those women who just oozes sexuality and beauty, and men can't resist her. And she becomes entwined with a doctor at the hospital that Corede works at, and Corede has fancied this doctor, in fact been in love with him for a very long time, so things sort of go horribly wrong. Anyway, there you go. My Sister the Serial Killer, Yinkin Braithwaite. I loved that. So I really hope that these novels might bring you some suspense and some entertainment and some enjoyment over the Christmas period. Thanks very much, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.